Maybe we'll start sitting down. Great, thank you everyone. And Allison told me to give her a thumbs up when I was going to start, but it looks like she already turned on my microphone. That's great. Well, good morning everyone. My name's Ariel Avgar, and I'm Senior Associate Dean for Outreach and Sponsored Research and a faculty member at the ILR School. And I'm really thrilled to welcome you all to this important launch of the State of New York Solar Workforce. It's a real pleasure to see all of you here in person and those of you joining us online. I was given a few minutes, so I'm gonna briefly situate the report that we're about to hear about in the context of what we do at the ILR School, and then give a few thanks for all the work that's gone into this report and the support we received from New York State. So as many of you know, Our school was founded in 1945 as the New York State School of Industrial and Labor Relations, or ILR for short, during a tremendously turbulent period when core questions about work, employment, and labor were front and center in the public discourse. Our mission then, as it remains strong today, is to advance the world of work through rigorous, high-quality research, and, in my notes I wrote, and all in capital, through deep engagement with the outside world, outside of the halls of academia. Now, what use is the work that we do up in Ithaca if it's not making it out into the real world? To that end, we opened our first outreach office in Buffalo a year after our founding in 1946, and 2 years later in New York City in 1948, where we've been in both cities ever since. And for the last almost 80 years, we've been committed to working across New York State with the goal of improving the lives of workers and their families and enhancing outcomes for unions, organizations, and communities. And today, we are living through another turbulent period, like the one we faced in 1945 when we were founded, one in which fundamental issues of work, labor, and employment are being contested and renegotiated. And two elements kind of stand out in the turbulent period that we're facing. First, how inextricably linked issues of work and labor are to the broader, bigger societal issues and challenges that we faced. And second, this is something that weighs on me and I think about each and every day, is the urgency of this moment. We don't really have time for the research that happens in Ithaca to hope that the research that happens in Ithaca will sort of naturally make its way out into the real world. We have to do more to engage and to make sure that our applied research makes it to stakeholders, practitioners, and policymakers. And so in an effort to meet the needs and the demands of the moment and to inform policymakers and practitioners, our school just launched the Center for Applied Research on Work this past September as one of the key ways in which we're enhancing efforts to engage again with policymakers and practitioners and to confront the most pressing societal issues of our time. It's hard to think of a more pressing challenge than the efforts to confront climate change, and even more so, to do so in a manner that's equitable and just. And that's exactly what our Climate Jobs Institute is doing each and every day, providing rigorous empirical evidence, like the findings that we're going to hear about in the report and the panel today, that shape action and drive change. The clean energy economy is growing rapidly in New York State and throughout the US, and the ILR's mission through our Climate Jobs Institute is to provide a better understanding of working conditions as well as labor and employment relations in important industries like renewable energy. I'm beyond proud that the Climate Jobs Institute is part of our new Center for Applied Research on Work. Okay, I want to do a few quick thanks before turning it on to the rest of the program. So first, a huge thanks to the entire Climate Jobs team, who are a model for engagement, rigor, and hard work. I want to call out and thank the folks who were especially instrumental in today's event and who worked on today's launch: Catherine Solis-Fonte, Daniel Castro, Joanna Lugo, Gerald Cantiago. A very big thanks to the team that worked on the report: Avalon Ho Expands and Jillian Anna Morley and Zach Cunningham. And a big thanks to the panel whose insights will help us today. A very big thanks to the ILR Conference Center and IT teams for all the work that goes into an event like today: Allison Dunsik, Seth Dardar, Edward Martinez, Johnny English, and Isabel Guerrero. And of course, a big thanks to Rachel Joseph, who keeps our New York City moving forward. During today's launch, we're going to have the opportunity to hear remotely via video from Senator Ramos and Assemblymember Bronson, Labor Committee chairs in the Senate and Assembly. And I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank both of them for the tremendous support they have given the ILR School in general and the Climate Jobs Institute in particular from the very start. We could not be in the position of doing the work that we do, the work that you're going to hear about today, without Senator Ramos and Assemblymember Bronson's effort. A big thanks to their support of ILR and the work that they do each day to improve the lives of New York State residents and workers in New York. It's a real treat. I saw him earlier, but I can't see him right now. Assemblymember Alex Boris was here. Well, I saw I saw Assembly Member Boris. I was really excited to see him for two reasons. First, the reason I should say is that he represents our district, and we're very pleased that he represents our district. And second, and the thing I wanted to say first, is that he is an ILR alum, I think 2013. And we're very proud both of his support of our district and support of our school. Okay, I'm almost done. I know we have a tight schedule. Finally, in these kinds of opening remarks, I often do this. I want to thank Dr. Lara Skinner for her amazing vision and leadership. Lara's been working tirelessly to draw attention to the inextricable link between the environmental movements and the labor movements well before it was kind of a theme that many of us talked about or thought about. And in fact, she's one of the reasons that equitable transition to a green economy is such a central part of our academic and policy discourse. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to a video that we're going to watch. And I also want to thank all of you for engaging with us in this important discussion. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, I'm New York State Senator Jessica Ramos. I represent District 13 in Queens. That includes the neighborhoods of Jackson Heights, Corona, East Elmhurst, and a few blocks of Rego Park and Forest Hills. I also am the chair of the Senate Committee on Labor, which is why I'm here, so pleased and honored to welcome you all to today's briefing on the state of New York solar. And that's brought to you by the amazing people at the Cornell Climate Jobs Institute. You know, we just wrapped up state budget negotiations, and I'm so proud to say that in this year's enacted budget, we made some serious gains on our efforts to establish the union climate economy that we've all been talking about and dreaming of. In addition to securing $22.5 million for the DOL's Just Transition program, we also secured $3 million for the Climate Jobs Institute and $200,000 for Solar One. And we got prevailing wages in the RAPID Act and the Climate Change Adaptation Cost Recovery Program. Very exciting. As you're going to learn in today's briefing, the renewable energy sector desperately needs safeguards to make sure workers are safe, respected, and paid a dignified wage. If we don't take steps to protect the labor standards in solar, wind, and other renewables, we're going to miss a big opportunity to build family-sustaining middle-class jobs. So I just want to thank Lara, Zach, Melissa, and the entire team at the Climate Jobs Institute for your work and, of course, for your commitment to building a better planet that works for each and every one of us.
Okay, great. Well, I have to start off by thanking Senator Ramos for that welcome message. You know, I really can't start the event without giving her a big thanks for her strong advocacy for working people in her district around New York State. You know, her advocacy for good jobs in New York State, and also her support for the Climate Jobs Institute. She mentioned that in her remarks. And just really having a strong commitment to building an equitable, climate-safe economy in New York State. So big thanks to Senator Ramos for all of her work and support. Really appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you. Thank you for being here, both in New York City and also online. We have a live stream going this morning. My name is Lara Skinner. I'm the Executive Director of the Climate Jobs Institute. As Ariel mentioned, we have been working at the intersection of labor, climate, and equity issues for more than a dozen years now. We have been, focused on this area for a long time now, and then we formally launched the Climate Jobs Institute in January 2023. So just over a year ago, we did that, brought this new institute into existence because we realized how important this work was and how much more we needed to do. The mission of the Climate Jobs Institute is to guide New York's and the nation's transition to a strong, equitable, and resilient clean energy economy that does four things. One, tackles the climate crisis at the scale and pace that science demands. Two, creates high-quality family and community-sustaining jobs. Three, confronts race and gender inequality. And 4, builds a clean energy workforce that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And we're committed to doing all of those things. As Associate Dean Avgar said, Climate Jobs Institute is part of CARO, the Center for Applied Research on Work. And what that means to us is that nearly all of our research, policy, and training and education work is applied, meaning it's done with partners on the ground, it's done with the intent of making change. We do it with our partners. Our research is guided by our partners' experience on the ground. We share our learnings with our partners like we're doing today. And we do our work in service of actually improving the lives of working people in New York and around the country. And as the New York State Labor School, we have a public service mission to improve working conditions and the world of work in New York State. And we're really proud of that mission. And for us at the Climate Jobs Institute, that looks like 5 core areas of work. One is research, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Studying the labor and employment impacts of climate change, climate policy, and the transition to a clean energy economy. 2, policy promulgation. We actually design and want to make sure that we're helping implement worker and equity-centered climate policy. It's not just climate policy, we want worker and equity-centered climate policy. 3, training and education. We do a lot of training of workers, union members, leaders, labor allies on the climate crisis and how to advance an equitable clean energy economy. Some of you may have heard that we actually launched a brand new online Cornell Climate Job Certificate this week on Wednesday. Really happy about that. Tell your friends and colleagues, participate in it. We'll be starting the next one probably around June. We also do training and education work that looks like creating important educational spaces that facilitate opportunities for diverse stakeholders to come together, share information, learn together, and work through tough issues. And today's event, I think, is a great example of that type of public convening that we do. The 4th thing we do is workforce development. This is a newer area, but a very important area of work for us. Frontline environmental justice, poor and communities of color have disproportionately borne the impacts of climate change and historic inequities. And we're committed to making sure that these communities have expanded and equitable pathways into high quality training programs and clean energy careers. High quality careers that really sustain families and communities. And then the 5th area of work for us is student engagement. Enriching the Cornell ILR student experience is very important to us. And we engage dozens of students in the research, policy, and training and education work that we do. And Senior Associate Dean Avgar mentioned that Assembly Member Alex Boris is here and is a former ILR student. I like to say, I don't know if he likes to say it, but he was my student. I think I got him interested in this area of work. I just want to, make sure that we make it clear and emphasize that we have a unique approach to climate work. We see that we have 2 crises. We have a crisis of climate change and we have a crisis of inequality, and that's inequality of income, wealth, gender, race, and more. And given this, it's really important to us that we design climate policy that not only reduces greenhouse gas emissions, we absolutely have to do that, but that we're also reducing inequality and the racial wealth gap. And we're contributing to building a more equitable economy that expands pathways into the middle class. So we have a very particular vision for how we go about addressing the climate crisis that we have. And there's a lot of research and evidence that raising the quality of jobs, ensuring that they're paid well, that they're high quality jobs is one of the best ways to reduce income and wealth and race and gender inequality. There's also a lot of evidence that belonging to a union, having collective voice, having representation in your workplace is also one of the best ways to improve job quality, including wages, benefits, retirement, and safety on the job. So towards this end, we believe our research on the labor and employment impacts of climate change, climate policy, and this transition is really important. And we want to understand how many new jobs are being created in the clean energy industry. How many jobs in the current energy economy are being eliminated? How does the quality of the old jobs compare to the quality of the new jobs? We need to understand this. Like, what do these transition pathways look like? How much are people paid? How are they paid? What are the health and safety conditions on the jobs? Are workers unionized or not? How does race and gender and immigration status impact job quality in the clean energy economy? And how does the type of work, whether it's residential, commercial, or utility scale work, impact job quality? These are the types of questions that we're trying to answer and we feel are really important to be able to guide this transition. Unfortunately, a lot of the current research on the clean energy economy and workforce is not great. A lot of the questions that we're trying to answer, there are no answers to yet. There's just not the data there yet. There's some basic input-output models for clean energy job creation, but most of them lack specificity and nuance. They're not specific to particular regions. They're not specific to the type of technology being used on a project or the scale of a project. Most clean energy job studies also lump categories of workers together. So you don't have a way to differentiate between construction workers, lawyers, salespeople, or manufacturing workers who work in the solar industry. Most clean energy studies don't differentiate between part-time, full-time, or contract workers, or clarify how many jobs are being filled by local workers versus roving crews that are moving across states to do projects. And finally, and probably most importantly, most of the clean energy job studies that currently exist are conducted by contacting solar developers and employers and asking them questions about their workforce, asking them questions about the size of their workforce, the conditions of the workers, and not actually communicating with the solar workers directly. And that's what makes this study that we're going to talk about today very unique. It's the first attempt at running a survey that goes directly to solar installers, solar workers. So as many of you know, transitioning to a climate safe economy is a big historic transition with historic time constraints. This decade that we're in right now is the most important one. It's a really tough transition to navigate. And our goal is to be able to provide the information on the labor and employment impacts of this transition that can help guide policymakers and others to navigate this transition. How do we do it in a way that we tackle climate change while also creating high quality jobs and expanding access to these jobs for communities that have faced historic inequities? That's what we're trying to do. And with that backdrop, I'm really excited for us to dig into the Climate Jobs Institute's first study into the working conditions in New York State solar industry. As I mentioned earlier, this is a first attempt at running a survey that reaches solar installers, solar workers directly. And we learned a lot from the study, including, although it's very time intensive to reach workers directly, our hope is to be able to expand the study moving forward and figure out how to cover other clean energy sectors in addition to solar, as well as look at working conditions in other parts of the country. We're actually finishing up a similar study in Texas where we're able to survey 1/3 of the solar workforce in Texas, which is quite incredible. We also want to be able to draw comparisons between union versus non-union workers in the industry. We want to be able to draw sharper distinctions between residential, commercial, and utility scale projects, and be able to examine many of the issues that were surfaced in this study that you're going to hear about in more depth. So that's what this looks like for us going forward. We have a long-term commitment to being able to understand conditions in this industry and guide policy in a way that helps transition us to an equitable clean energy economy. So for the rest of the morning, we're going to present the findings of our survey study. We're going to have a panel discussion with 3 solar installers. And then we're going to open up the discussion for questions from the audience. We're excited to have this conversation with you all in the room and online. Like I said, this is a first take. And so really getting feedback and guidance from you all on where we go next with this research will be incredibly helpful. And so before I move us to the study, I just want to say thanks to everyone here in the room and online for being here and joining us for this important release and discussion. We really appreciate it. I want to thank the panelists for joining us this morning. We appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences and help us learn about your experiences on the job. I want to thank Senior Associate Dean Avgar for opening the event and really championing the applied work that we do at the Climate Jobs Institute and across ILR outreach. And then I want to thank the whole CJI team who made this work happen, both the research, the report, and the event, the Climate Jobs Institute administrative team that Senior Associate Dean Avgar mentioned earlier, as well as the ILR conference and tech teams for supporting this event and making it really great. So now I'm going to turn it over to the main authors and research leads for this study, my wonderful colleagues, Avalon Hope Spuns and Jillian Morley. Avalon is the faculty lead and assistant director of research for Climate Jobs Institute, and Jillian Morley is the research support specialist of the Climate Jobs Institute. Big thanks to Avalon, who spent over 2 years bringing this study to fruition, and to both Avalon and Jillian, who have worked really hard over the last several months to analyze the survey results and prepare the report that summarizes the results that we're releasing today. And everyone should see we've got the flyers on your seats with a QR code to the report. It's also available on our website. So we've got a few copies outside, but really hope that you'll take a look at the full study. And just want to say thanks to everyone. And Jillian, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you all so much for being here again and for tuning in online. My name is Jillian Morley. I am a research support specialist here at Cornell's Climate Jobs Institute. Before we get started, I just want to reiterate our appreciation to Senator Ramos, Assemblymember Bronson, Dean Ariel Avgar, and Dr. Lara Skinner for their continued support of this work. We would also like to extend our gratitude to the New York State Department of Labor for funding this study. This report has been led by Avalon Hochsponds for over the past 2 years in partnership with SSRS, and I'm so appreciative of having had the opportunity to participate in this research since joining the team in July of 2023. So we're going to start out by providing a quick background of why and how we did this study, and then we'll give you a brief description of our sample. From there, I'll pass it on to Avalon to discuss our key findings and the research we plan to pursue going forward. So going into this study, we wanted to learn about the working conditions in the solar installation and maintenance workforce in New York State. Existing research on the solar working conditions is limited. In fact, a lot of what we assume to be true about the solar workforce comes from research on adjacent industries like construction or other energy efficiency work. Additionally, as Dr. Skinner pointed out, the data on the solar workforce primarily come from employer reporting. For instance, the Interstate Renewable Energy Council's most recent solar census comes from a survey of approximately 34,000 business establishments. And the data in this census are collected each year by the Department of Energy for the annual U.S. Energy and Employment Report. Employer surveying is a practice that we often see. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, occupational employment and wage statistics data, for example, are also collected from employers. Of course, there are several benefits to collecting employer-side data, with sample size being a major one of them. However, based on existing research on transients, meaning short-term, multi-location employment in similar industries such as construction, we wanted to build our understanding of the solar industry from the perspective of workers directly. Collecting data from workers themselves has also allowed us to ask more specifically about their experiences and conditions while working in the solar industry. As we will discuss later in this presentation, based on our results, we do believe that the accuracy of data on solar jobs requires more research from the perspective of solar workers, as over 40% of our respondents worked for more than one employer. We don't yet have an understanding of how high rates of multi-employer work might affect the accuracy of employer-side data. Our target population was solar industry workers over the age of 18 that had worked on at least one solar panel installation or maintenance project in New York State between December 16th, 2021 and September 30th, 2023. Our survey questions focused on the experiences of these workers on solar sites, including compensation, working conditions, benefits, and more. We worked with 8 different organizations to distribute the survey, including unions, training centers, academic partners, and nonprofit organizations. Respondents were provided with a $20 incentive for completing the survey, and were also offered an additional $10 incentive for referral of another worker. Responses were subject to extensive quality control measures, which are detailed more in our report. And responses that were determined to be inauthentic were removed prior to analysis. This left us with 264 valid survey responses. After our team ran an initial round of data exploration and significance testing, our partners at SSRS ran 4 separate logistic regression models. One model looked at demographics alone, and 3 additional models included indicators of industry type, certification type, New York State regions worked respectively. The latter 3 models were run separately due to collinearity between the 3 variables tested. It's particularly important to describe our sample characteristics because of what we mentioned earlier about the challenges about existing data sources and research on the solar installation workforce. We do believe that more research is necessary to determine what a representative sample would look like. Although the demographics represented in our sample may not be reflective of those seen in employer-side data on solar workers and other data on similar industries, we feel very confident that our findings offer valuable contributions to the conversation around the solar workforce's characteristics, needs, and equity in the industry. Before delving into other demographics, it's essential to highlight the fact that this sample was made up of 99.6 non-union solar workers. This point is key in contextualizing our results and begs the question, how might conditions, pay, benefits, and other important issues differ for union solar workers? This question is especially relevant considering the fact that in our background research, our team identified that New York solar projects are being installed and maintained by large national companies, a level of consolidation that could present an opportunity for more worker organizing. Now I will jump into other sample characteristics. We allowed respondents to select all that apply for race and ethnicity self-categorization. As you can see here, we had an equal number of Black or African American and white respondents who together made up the majority of our sample. Our respondents were predominantly male, with only 17 of the 264 respondents identifying as female and 3 identifying as non-binary. In order to minimize the number of sensitive research subjects in our sample, we did not sample minors for this study, and it is possible that this exclusion could have affected some of the ratios of age groups that we collected. One discrepancy that I will also call attention to is the fact that while about 94% of our respondents were between the ages of 26 and 45, recently released estimates by the Bureau of Labor Statistics based on the current population survey, which is not employer-side data, put the percentage of solar installation workers between 25 and 44 at closer to 55%. Moving on to some information about the work arrangements for our sample respondents. The majority of respondents reported that they were directly employed by a solar company. However, as I said earlier, and shown here, over 40% of our respondents worked for more than one employer. The next few slides cover relevant geographical considerations. First, respondents often performed work in multiple regions throughout New York State. But more surprising, as shown on the next slide, many respondents reported that they had currently lived in other states at the time of the survey, which is interesting considering that an eligibility requirement for participation in the survey was that they had to have worked on a solar project in New York State within the past year. We also found that many of our respondents had performed solar work in multiple states. Finally, 65% of our respondents reported that they had moved or relocated to work at a New York State solar work site. To our team, these responses indicate that solar installation and maintenance work in our state may be largely done by a transient workforce. Further research is, however, necessary to confirm this hypothesis. Now I'll pass it over to Avalon Hochspons, the Director of Research of our team for the Climate Jobs Institute.
Thanks, Jillian. Thanks everyone for being here in person and on the live stream. Now I'll go into some key findings focused on job quality and racial disparity. First, taking a look at benefits. The majority of our sample indicated that they did not receive any benefits from their employer. I think everyone in this room knows the importance of benefits. Solar construction workers specifically face increased occupational health and safety risks. And so things like paid time off and healthcare are especially important to this industry. When looking at race, we found even more stark findings where workers of color were less likely to receive benefits than white workers. When isolating for industry type, we found that Black workers were still less likely to receive benefits than other workers. Taking a look at pay, 34% of our sample was paid by number of panels installed. Piece rate pay, including payment per panel, can have adverse outcome on workers because it incentivizes pay on worker productivity on site, which can be dangerous and lead to worse occupational health and safety risks. Black and Hispanic workers were the least likely to be paid an annual salary, with Black workers more likely to be paid hourly rate and Hispanic workers more likely to be paid by number of panels installed. When looking at industry type, utility installers were the least likely to be paid an annual rate. When looking at how workers receive their compensation, 37% of our sample were paid in cash. Black workers more likely than other workers to be paid in cash. Being paid in cash can limit benefit access to workers and should be monitored closely. When comparing pay scale, for those that reported median annual salary, we found that white workers made almost double that of Hispanic and Black workers. Black workers were also more likely than other workers to experience wage theft on New York State solar sites. And workers of color were less likely to report wage theft compared to other workers. For example, of the 5 white workers that were victims of wage theft, all 5 white workers formally reported it, while workers of color did not follow the same pattern. Taking a look at tenure and retention, as Jillian was saying, 40% of our sample worked for multiple employers. 37% of our sample also indicated in the past year they changed jobs 1 to 4 times in the solar industry. The average tenure across our sample was about 20 months with their main employer, but that looked differently when examining by race, where we found that white workers were more likely to have longer tenure with their employer and had almost double the rate of tenure than workers of color. Utility scale installers were also more likely to have the lowest tenure with their employers. Taking a look at certifications, across all races, there was some level of uncertainty if certifications would transfer for their next job site or work site. This can be due to workers maybe not understanding or knowing what type of job site they'll be on next and what level of certification they'll need, but it also may indicate a larger trend where workers don't understand the rights for them to maintain their certification across work sites. Black workers were also more likely to have self-paid for their certifications. Self-pay for certifications can lead to barriers to entry into the industry and need to be monitored and researched further. Lastly, taking a look at stimulant use, the majority of our sample indicated that stimulant use was a problem at their solar work sites in New York State. This is a common issue in many industries, specifically also in the construction industry. However, this in conjunction with things like payment per panel and lack of benefits indicates that there may be more adverse effects on solar workers, and the intersection between stimulant use and payment per panel should be examined and researched further, especially on solar work sites in the state. Lastly, the Capital Region and Finger Lakes region were more likely to indicate than other regions that stimulant use was an issue on their solar work sites. So more details about these findings are in the report that everyone should have access to, in addition to other findings that we found. Just want to reiterate, this is an exploratory study. We're happy to meet with anyone one-on-one to talk about our methods and our findings. And as Lara was saying, we do want to do more research comparing this specifically to a union sample of solar workers to see if their working conditions differ in any way. And this is a sister study to a much larger study that we're doing in Texas in partnership with the Texas Climate Jobs Project. I think they're live streaming, so shout out to all of those folks and great researchers there leading that work. And then lastly, we want to do further research on barriers to organizing the renewable energy sector in New York State, but also the United States at large. And I just want to give a shout out and thank you to my whole CGI team for making this possible. Thank you to the deans and the New York State Department of Labor for investing in research like this. Thank you to SSRS and thank you to all the organizations that distributed the survey. Thank you to Nika Reese from Green Workers Alliance, who acted as a thought partner in designing and implementing the study. And lastly, thank you to all the workers that shared their voices with us. It was really an honor to collect this data and present it. And now we'll hear from Assemblymember Harry Bronson.
Hello, my name is Assemblymember Harry Bronson. Thank you so much for including me today for the release of this very important study. Sorry, I am not able to join you in person. But the report released today by Cornell Jobs Institute should serve as a clarion call to action for both New York State solar industry leaders and policymakers about the urgent need for worker justice within the New York State solar industry. I am thankful to Cornell Jobs Institute for their work to analyze this industry and for providing us with a framework to make the necessary changes for a more equitable workforce. As Labor Chair, my priority is to ensure that all workers are protected, which includes protection against wage theft and bad actors. The inequalities and violations brought to light here indicate a shocking degree of unfairness and disrespect for the hard-working people who make solar energy a reality for New Yorkers throughout the state. Equity means that all workers are paid to the same standards and scale within the same worksite, and that all workers are subject to the same opportunity to succeed. This report identified a serious gap between the experiences of white workers and workers of color on solar job sites, including that workers of color received lower pay than white workers doing the same job. It also found that white workers disproportionately received benefits as part of their pay when workers of color did not. When one group is unjustly deprived of benefits, that also constitutes a form of wage theft. It is abundantly clear that we have serious work to do to bring equity and safety to solar work sites and must do better for our solar industry workers. Your report will help us develop the tools and take the necessary steps to achieve this. I am proud as Labor Chair to work with you to bring equity and fairness to our solar workforce. Thank you so much for your work.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Cunningham. I am on our training and education team at the Climate Jobs Institute and very excited to be moderating the panel that we have today. Before we dive in, just want to give heartfelt thanks to Assemblymember Bronson for sharing the words, but also for his work on behalf of working people and on behalf of the Climate Jobs Institute, both during his time as Labor Chair and before that as well. Also want to thank Avalon and Jillian for a fantastic report and the rest of the team that supported it. I think this is a really important contribution to ongoing discussions amongst labor, policymakers, workforce development professionals, and others about how we create a clean energy economy that is tackling the climate crisis at the scale it needs to be tackled and the pace it needs to be tackled, but also creating family and community sustaining jobs, treating workers with dignity and respect on the job, and then expanding opportunities for communities that are oftentimes left behind. So thank you for your work on the study. And now that we've gotten an overview of the study results, I'm really excited to dig into some of the issues that Avalon and Jillian highlighted by talking with three folks who have worked in the solar industry in New York State as well as other states around the country. So I'll introduce to my far left, Annie Covington. Right next to me is Levi Covington. And then in the middle is Oscar Pineda. So thank you so much. We can give a round of applause for joining us. So these three have cumulatively many years of experience working in solar in New York State and other states, and have had some experiences that I think highlight and track some of what we heard in the report findings today. So we'll dive right in, and we'll start with you, Levi, and go down the line. If you could just start off by introducing yourself, telling us about the specific work that you do in the solar industry, how long you've been doing that work, and then just a bit about how you got started in the field.
Yeah, so my name is Levi Covington. I specifically deal with the utility scale solar side of things, and I am an electrical foreman with them. So, my scope of work is anything from running wire, pulling it, to terminating it, making the site actual run, doing terminations to the substations and even to the poles, to go to the grid. So I kind of got started in it about 6.5 years ago. There was a site little solar garden by the house. I think it was 10 megawatt?
Maybe.
It wasn't very big. It was about 15 minutes from the house. I started there for about $13 an hour, and really fell in love with the work. I mean, we worked like 3 months straight. I think we had like 1 day off that entire time, and that was like Thanksgiving Day. They really worked us, but I mean, I really fell in love with the work. It was easy. It was fun. It was paid really well for the area I was in. And I decided I wanted to chase it, and actually do this for a living, because once a solar site usually comes to your town, that's pretty much it. You're not going to get another one there. So you're going to have to go chase it if you want to continue to do that work. I think that's about it on that.
Great, thanks. Oscar.
I had a friend, he was doing it. Sorry, that's kind of loud. I had a friend, he was doing it. And, one day I just called him and said, hey, you still doing solar? He said, yeah. And he got me on the site that very next week. And ever since then, I've been doing it.
And could you tell us a little bit about the work that you do on the solar sites?
Same thing as Levi, just pull wire, install conduit, send things to the grid, terminations, testing.
We actually work closely with each other.
Yeah, we actually work
on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And, literally everything he said, I'll do the same thing.
Great. Annie.
My name's Annie Covington. I am a renewable energy recruiter. I have worked with numerous staffing companies to get these fields built. Obviously, I got started because my husband and son were working on a field, and they're like, we really enjoy this. And I thought, well, if you really like it, then I guess I better like it too. So I didn't know a lot about solar. I had no clue how you chase solar, or got into it. We literally they answered a buy sell trade site ad on Facebook looking for laborers. No experience, no certifications, none of that. And they just threw them out on these sites. And I thought, that doesn't seem very safe, but what do I know? And so I started at that point, just trying to organize workers and figure out, how do you get to travel? How do you find these sites? It's not like you just Google solar site near me and they pop up. A lot of the information you get is 2 years before the site actually gets built because of permitting and, interconnection, times, things like that. And so I felt like, well, we'd utilize social media. So I had a hand in helping build a solar group that then I would post jobs. I thought, well, if I'm looking for jobs for myself, somebody else might, need this. So we were posting it online. That group has now grown to about 20,000 solar workers. Nico got a hold of me and kept kind of trying to get me to go to Green Workers Alliance. And I thought, I'm so busy working right now trying to recruit. I need 1 million electricians. I feel like I have to save the whole world, climate change and hire all of them. And so it took me a little while, but then I realized these staffing agencies are the problem. They're the ones that are really exploiting workers, especially people of color. I noticed that it's really a race to the bottom. Uh, if you can get, I mean, I would fight all the time to get people hired out of the teens, basically, for this work. And it was like pulling teeth. And I felt like I could make changes from within until I realized it's really hard to steer such a large boat, with these agencies and try to get them to listen. And I'm, trying to explain to them that I have real experience here. My entire family's out here. I care about their safety. I care about their job security, and then you become family. We travel these sites, we run into each other again. So I want to see them at the next site. And, we lose people to different deaths and injuries. And for me as a mom, as a person who cares, you don't want to see that. So that's where I started, but I realized I couldn't do the work that I wanted to do from inside the devil, the machine. And so I decided to work with NACO and GWA to really start organizing these workers and try to find, we'd love to be into a union, but we travel. Like we just did our taxes. We had to file in 5 different states. We do this every year. I think 6 might be the most that we've done in a year, but it's hard. I mean, we sold our house. We live 24/7, like with our truck and trailer, camper, and we go wherever. We call it the solar coaster, wherever, it's kind of like being in the military. You get your orders and, people say, well, how long are you going to be there? I don't know. We usually say 6 to 9 months. That's the general time frame, but it could be 2 months, could be, a year from now. We don't know. It just really depends on weather, supply chain issues, what kind of labor, force that they have. But I've staffed in 30 different states so far. And I have on my roll about 2,000 workers that I would consider family now that, just trying to find them jobs. But that's what we're noticing is that, the people of color are definitely disproportionately going through staffing agencies to get onto the field, while their cohorts, who may be white or know somebody, are getting on a direct hire position. And then that's where the benefits come in and the better salaries. But the temp agencies are just, they're working hourly and they're working incredibly long hours. I mean, 70-hour work week is a standard solar work week in utility scale.
It seems,
And that's year round. So, I mean, that's still hard on you.
it seems to be that if you work for an actual company, direct hire, you usually get 7 days per diem. That's usually a pretty, solid thing. So if you're at a temp agency, you usually get days worked per diem. And even though you're there on the weekends, they won't pay you that per diem to be there. So, I mean, that's something that, is really a hindrance on the temp worker as well. So you're actually having to pay to be at work.
Because you're too far from home to go home.
And
I mean,
they
if you're in
call-
Montana and you live in Texas, you can't go home on the weekend. If you get rained out, you can't go home, but the hotel still has to be paid. And a lot of times these staffing agencies have about a $75 a day per diem. And I mean, that works if you're staying at, the no-till motel, but, it doesn't have a way to cook. You don't have, I mean, a lot of people live in either their camper or in a hotel situation. And, 6 to 9 months, I don't know if you guys travel that much, but it's a long time to be eating out of, ramen noodle cups. Or, we play a game, we say you're solar without saying you're solar. And you'll see, the guy with like all the chips and all the prepackaged food in their car. And you're like, yep, you do solar. Because, you can't even cook a healthy meal at the end of the day. So
It's not uncommon for people to come on site, like maybe the first week or two until they get their first paycheck, and literally sleep at rest stops in their car. I mean, I've done it before myself.
And
yeah, we stayed in a tent for 100
So-
days.
something I'd love to hear a bit more on, particularly from Levi and Oscar. So you've started talking about the difference between temp agencies, direct hires. So in the last year or so, if you could just give us an idea, how many different companies or contractors have you worked for? How many different states have you worked in? And maybe just a bit about how that affects your experience on the job, right? Whether it's particular state that you're working in, particular company.
I would say that in the last year, I think I've worked in probably 4 different states and probably for 4 different contractors in the last year. So with that being said, I have ranged in anywhere from $30 an hour to pay to $50 an hour, depending on where it's at. In jumping jobs, I usually get a 15% raise if I jump jobs because then I can negotiate the pay from the beginning. Once you get onto a company, it's really hard to get anything else out of them. And the further down south you go, the less pay you're going to get. I mean, down in Texas, you're probably not going to get more than $35 an hour. That's like pulling teeth. And benefits are less, per diem's less. Everything's way less the further down south you go. And the more you come up north, everything just gets a little bit better. I think that's because y'all are more union out here. So y'all are kind of having to compete with the union wages and, just have the availability of the union jobs here. Down south, I mean, that's a 4-letter word. You talk about the union, they could fire you tomorrow. So that's one of, big impact that I've seen from just working in different states to just how the energy on the site is, like the way that people talk to you, the way they interact with you, the way that they're more respectful up here than down south. Because down south, I mean, it's a work to right state. They can fire you for no reason at all. You can look at them wrong and you're gone. Up here, you're way more protected in that aspect. That's good.
Yeah, and I also feel like maybe the pay is higher up here because it is more expensive to stay up this way. Where in comparison to down south, you might be able to find a hotel, not a good one, maybe for like $300 a week. But, the conditions probably won't be too good, but, the money will make more sense. I think I've worked for maybe 3 different companies this within a year span from last year to this point, same date. Maybe 3 different companies. I've been in Illinois, upstate New York, and now currently we're a little closer to this way. And I can say that the work conditions are better. They don't push you as hard as if you were to be in the South. They respect people a lot more. But the temp thing is still the same. When it comes, we work hard, show up every day, be there first, and then get laid off first. And that's typically how it goes for us temps. Because currently right now I'm a temp. But most times they'll ask me to join the company at the end of the project. But when you look at the numbers they offer in comparison to being a temp, sometimes being a temp, it'd be more worth it than working for the company itself.
And would love to dig more into some of the specific issues that come up on job sites. So you've started talking about pay and other issues, but in terms of health and safety or other areas, what are some issues or problems that you and your coworkers face on solar job sites?
The biggest issues that I think we face safety-wise is when you have a bunch of temp agencies staffing for these solar sites, you have a lot of people that are inexperienced. Sometimes they haven't done more than anything than work a bounce house. I mean, I've even had somebody work at the local pizza shop around the corner.
Yeah.
So no experience at all coming into a construction area with heavy equipment and, just the physical labor that is demanded out of people. You do get a lot of either rework because you're having to go back and fix things because people don't know what they're doing, or you get a lot of injuries because people don't know where to place themselves and be, in an area that's not going to wind up being an issue later, especially with, machinery and stuff going around, line of fire. You might not be fully aware of everything that's going around you when you're doing your task. And that can be a really big problem because there's so many machineries that, that's going around you all the time that if you don't have a 360-degree awareness, then you can really be in a situation where you can get yourself killed pretty easily. And I believe that's the biggest issue that I've seen so far on the disconnect, because if we're in a state like this, it's union, there's a lot more emphasis on safety and things that, we have more people that have experiences. They've done commercial work. They've done, industrial work. They've done other things that pertain to construction and not just coming from around the corner at the local McDonald's And that's also kind of has to do with the rural areas as well, as they might not have the opportunities to have all these construction jobs and stuff like that. So you get in these rural areas and you try to bring all these locals in, and you just get a lot of inexperienced people, and it takes a lot more time to train those people. And it takes a lot more focus off of your job to watch and make sure that they're doing their stuff right and that they're going to be in a safe area and not get hurt. And it tends to make the job go a little slower. Not that that's a bad thing, but then you have the companies pressing on you. Hey, we have these deadlines so we can get these tax breaks, and we can move on to the next site, and we really need you to push. And you're like, yes, but if I push, we're gonna, sacrifice safety. And they're like, well, we don't really care about that right now. And that's what I've noticed.
And another thing I've noticed was is that sometimes you go into these companies and you might know more than the person that's supposed to be above you, right? And, I would have to teach this person how to be my boss, So that's another thing. Like, yeah, I know, but, the way I talk, the way I carry myself, it might be a little bit different in comparison to the next man. But, I would still have to teach this person how to be my boss, basically. And, it could be a little bit frustrating sometimes because I've been paid less and I still have to coach a person that's getting paid more than me. And that's not, I don't think that's how it should be. But, I've kind of grown into this person where it's just, okay, I got to take care of what I have to take care of. So I do what I got to do.
To elaborate on that, I worked on a union site where I was, the boss of the union guys, but I was not union myself. They were working for my contractor, and they actually got paid more than I did. And I was their boss and told them how to do the jobs that we were doing. But because they were union, they got better benefits and better pay than I did as a full-time employee without a company. And that's wrong. I mean, how are you going to teach somebody how to do their job and still get paid less than they do?
Exactly.
And I think that's a struggle too that we're seeing is that, as the study showed, a lot of us are going to different states. I send people out all over and with that, being said, depending on the state, depending on the legislation there, I know you guys have probably heard about Texas and Florida, and they're killing the water bills. It's 118 degrees outside. These guys are outside for 12-hour days, sometimes 6-7 days a week. They're supposed to not work more than 13 days on and 1 day off, but let's be realistic, that doesn't always happen. But the other thing is that, like he was saying, with the New York mandates that you have your OSHA 10 at least before you go into a construction site. That 10 hours of training is so important, for the worker safety, because in Texas, that's where we're, originally from. You don't OSHA 10, OSHA 30, things like that. They're like, it's handy if you have it, but we don't really care. And then, like he was saying too, we don't have a strong union presence. So a lot of people, the temp agency is their only way in. And of course, they're just looking at this to make their money off the quantity of people going in. They don't really care about their safety. Those guys don't have health benefits, things like that. So New York is definitely better. There's obviously room for improvement, but what we have noticed over, or at least the trend for the last 4 years is he's still making the same money he made when he started, but he doesn't work 80 hours anymore. Now he works 40 hours, which is crazy. I'm all like, what do we do with the rest of, normally there was a joke of what do you do after Wednesday? You only work 40 hours. Now we have weekends. It's weird. We, up until last year, our marriage was really struggling. When you're working that much, and the both of us were working anywhere from 80 to 90 hours a week. It's kind of hard to have a relationship. It's hard to have a family, go to any events so you miss all the birthdays and things like that. So there's a lot of things that people don't, you take for granted being at home every night. And those are the things that we don't have because we don't know when we'll be home again. We sold our house after 2.5 years of never being there. Our kids were just living there. We were like, well, you guys are grown.
I had
It's
that
time
house
to
for
kick them
2
out. So we
years.
sold the house, bought a truck and a trailer. We're like, well, find us if you can,
I had the house for 2 years, not seen it for 2 weeks.
Yeah, he was like, I don't know where anything is in this house. I'm like, you're never here. But that was because he worked 2.5 years before he got a 2 weeks of vacation. You know, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but after working that many hours for 2.5 years, all through the pandemic, finally he's, you know, was like, I have to take a couple of weeks off. Like I would like to go home. And he had to risk whether he would have a job. They said that the job starts, you know, in Austin on this date. And if you're not there, we can't guarantee your position. He said, well, I'm going home to Georgia for a little while. And if the job's still open in 2 weeks, I'll be there. But that's the insecurity that you run into as well, especially when you're, you know, a transient worker. I mean, if something were to happen to his job today, we're a long way from Texas. You know, and then what do? You tough it out here and try to make it, or you go back home and know that you're going back to poverty wages. I mean, there's no middle class when you're talking in the teens. I mean,
Which is one thing I wanted to say. I want to say thank you to Ann, because what she has done with the one website with the page, man, I know people that live off of that. There's people out on the solar field that live off of that. Groups of guys, thousands of guys that would not have a job if it wasn't for Ann's page.
She's almost famous, y'all. I've literally went places and they're like, "You're Annie from American Solar Farms?" And they're like,
I'm telling you. I followed that page before I even met Levi, and I just happened to run into these people on the site. And that's another thing. The solar world is so small. You run into everybody at least 5 times.
I can tell you.
I thought I'd be next to the person that started the page. Yeah.
Great. And so thank you so much for outlining these various sort of issues that pop up on solar side to solar side. I want to dig into one specific one a bit more, and that's training. So Annie, you had mentioned OSHA 10 requirements, had mentioned sort of how they're more lax in some places than others. Levi, you had talked about companies sort of at the same time cutting corners on training and safety, but also pushing for speed and more production. Would
Very
just
much.
love to hear more on sort of the technical part of the work, how you do the job, but also health and safety, what your training has looked like, what type of certifications that you've gotten, and how those sort of do they help lead to other job opportunities or increased pay?
So I've been lucky in the training aspect. I've got most of my training on the job through the companies. From your research, that tracks because I'm white. Yeah, it's been cool to see how many people go out there on these sites and get training, but it doesn't transfer to other jobs, or they don't see the potential that some of these people have in the training that they actually have got, and the things that they can actually do because they are minorities, or because the people just don't trust other companies. Does that make sense? So they don't trust the certifications that other companies gave them. Maybe they have a bad rep, you know, something happened or something. So it comes down to the company's usually going to train you themselves. But with that being said, it doesn't transfer to other companies. And for the opportunities to get a better job, unless it's a third-party certification, it's probably not going to do you any good. And for those third-party certifications, you're going to have to come out your pocket.
Yep.
Oscar, any other thoughts on that?
No, he said it all. I usually go to different companies, and those certifications are only good for that one company.
A lot of
And
times for the operators, even they'll, if they don't have a third party cert, they'll have them come to the site and they do what they call a rodeo, and they'll test you on the equipment. And if they say you're good, you may be this contractor certified and get a card for them. But the problem is when you're bounced into your next job, because you know it's with a different contractor, they don't want a cert from that the last company because it doesn't hold any weight. So a lot of times they'll tell these people to go to Sunbelt, to go to United Rentals. I do a lot of work in Ohio, and like there's only a couple of trainers in like Cincinnati and Columbus. They're not always there. The certs can be like $150. I mean, if you're out of work, who the heck has $150 to go get a cert for a potential job? It's not even a guarantee that you end up with that job. I've got one of my guys who's a GWA member. He went through NCCER training, can run all heavy equipment. And
Could you just let folks know what that is for those?
It's a national certification. I don't ask me each of those national something. construction equipment, so he can, it would be like the equivalent. I don't know if any of you guys have any food service, but like your local food handlers, card versus like ServSafe, which is nationally recognized. So NCCR is nationally recognized, yet a lot of these companies will still tell him he needs to go and get a Sunbelt United Rentals, certifications, like, certification that he's gotten. So that's another thing with legislation, like these things need to, and OSHA will put things in, like right now they've got a clause in for the pile drivers that they need to be riggers. That's like unheard of in solar. And then they want you to go get a $300 or $400 cert, and then they want to pay this guy $25 an hour. It's not going to happen. I mean, that guy doesn't have it, but all of these certs they want you to pay for pretty much out of your pocket, and they're prerequisites a lot of times to get to the job. So that bars a lot of folks who are, in the working poor or in rural areas. Another thing that I just wanted to speak on real quick, as far as the ruralness, I hate that word, rural, is that when these guys are going to put in a farm, it takes a lot of time to permit these, and they'll have town hall meetings and stuff, but they'll go and they will talk to this community and say, listen, we're going to bring in 250 jobs. This is all going to be for locals. And that sounds great, feels good to the community. But the problem is how many of those people have ever installed a solar farm? That's insanely dangerous, and it's never going to happen.
In the rural areas, how many people do you think actually live out there that don't already have jobs and are willing to quit their jobs to come work for us
for
a
your temporary
time?
job?
And go back to the job that they already have. That doesn't make sense.
And so what the reality is that's the feel good story that we say in the beginning to get the okays. Then what happens is there's not 80% local. What it's really, they call it an 80-20 split. It's supposed to be 80% local, 20% travelers, so we can train the locals, right? What it ends up being is about 80% travelers, and maybe if you're lucky, you can get 20% local, because if the area is that economically depressed, they've already left. They've already gone and chased something else. We used to be in oil and gas, and you go to where those are West Texas, different places like that. There's nobody there. I mean, the people are already left to go to chase their next job. So reality is that this is all probably 80% of this work, maybe even more. I think 80 is pretty conservative, is actually by a transient workforce in utility scale. Now on residential and commercial, that may be a little bit different, but in utility scale, that's what we're all travelers, and we do it because we love it. So we want to keep doing it.
I don't want to do anything else. Like this is my career. I love this job, but at the same time, I think it's really important that we fight for making this job better and sustainable for everyone.
And I'm going to ask one more question. Before I do that, just a reminder for folks here in the audience or online, we'll be taking some questions. So for the folks online, there should be a way to submit those. Others, if you want to write them down, start letting things percolate a bit, now is the time. I want to pick up on what both Annie and Levi just mentioned, that you love this job. So my last question is two parts. One, what is it that you like about this work? Why is it that you want to stay in this field? And then also, if you could change one thing about the job, what would that be? And I'll start with Oscar in the middle.
Well, I like this job. I love this job because, the work is easy. It's not for everyone. That's one thing I can say. To me, it's easy because I don't mind being outside the rain, sleet, snow, hot, cold. It doesn't matter. I'll be outside. I'll work hard, whatever. For me, this is a perfect place for people who didn't have a good start. I didn't grow up, in a nice house. I didn't grow up like you guys know what I'm trying to say. And it's a perfect place for me because it gives us chances to, create a regular life, above the poverty line. Right. And it might not be generational wealth, but it can lead to it. It gives me a little bit of hope for it. So that's what I love about it. The only thing that I can say is bad about this line of work is the weather. The weather. It gets really cold some days, it gets really hot some days. Sometimes it's rain and you have to stay out there and work. But, you know, they got rain jackets and coats and fishing shirts, so you'll be all right. Yeah.
Great. Annie, Levi?
You wanna go?
I mean, I love this job because I like the interaction with people. I like teaching people. I like the traveling. I like making a bigger impact on the world. That's really where it comes from. What was the other part of that question?
If you could change one thing about the job.
If I could change one part, it's to unionize. We need to unionize.
Right. And Annie?
For me, you know, I love the work because, you know, I have 3 granddaughters. I would like to, you know, the climate numbers don't look good for us, you know, 2030 and 2050. I would like to, you know, be a part of the solution. Obviously you know, I'm only one person, but the power of organizing folks. I mean, we have 250,000 solar workers. I think the last count, you know, and that number is so low compared to what we need to actually keep up. So what I love about this is that I give people, you know, like Oscar was saying, you know, a chance to get into a career where they can pull themselves up from being working poor and into middle class. A lot of us have no idea what middle class is. The bar has been moved so many times. I mean, I'm 45 and I'm not even sure where the bar is anymore. I mean, we finally made it to 6 figures and I thought, oh, okay, good. No, still missed it. They're still jumping, you know? So one thing that I would like to see, you know, change is that, first of all, like, you know, Levi was saying, we've got to unionize. We have got to get the temp camp agencies out of this. Their whole, you know, the way they run business, I call it dial-a-drunk. They put these staffing things in right next to the liquor store, a check cashing place, and then a day labor. And they look at it as a job like that. First of all, this is skilled work. I don't believe in unskilled labor, but this is definitely skilled work. These guys have crafts. They want to hone their craft and they want to do solar. And in order to do that, we established the first part of solar is you got to be willing to travel, and it's not for everybody. But for those of us who can, we do it because we love it and we want to do it. We'd love a union to take us in. I mean, we have no problem with the union. We just can't get a union to absorb us and figure out how to make all the politics work out with us, you know, moving 4 or 5 different states. Personally, you know, with the company that Levi's with right now, they said they have enough work for him to retire in New York. And I'm like, hey, I'm good with that. You know, like I've actually started looking at buying a house. You know, they've got 4 or 5 sites coming up to the Finger Lakes region. So, you know, I've been looking around there. I'm like, I don't know, are we going to settle down in New York and just do this? And he's like, I don't know. I think we have a chance. And I'm like, I feel a lot better because we could get into a union. That would, that would be nice. A pension would be great, you know, not having to pay the ridiculous insurance premiums that we pay currently. I mean, every benefit that he has, it has a price tag. And, you know, I would like to be able to leave something, you know, behind that's bigger than us. Like I said, with the oil and gas, we would go home every night. I was scared for his safety. I also felt like absolute horrible because I'm like, we're just doing nothing but trashing this planet. You know, he's a big nature guy. So when this all worked out, it worked well for us. We got our son into it. He is now a director of safety and commissioning for another company. And he's able to raise his 3 daughters and have a better start than we surely did. So, you know, for that's the exciting thing about solar for me. You know, like I said, it's just giving everybody a chance to, if you work hard, you know, they tell you work hard and you'll make it. You can do it in solar. But I want to see the inequality definitely leveled out. And I would like to see the geographical discrepancies with pay. You know, I mean, whether they're building this in New York or Texas or Montana, the work is exactly the same. Being outside all day is exactly the same. What doesn't matter what state you're in. The only thing that really changes is maybe your lodging and your cost of conducting business, in that economy. But we pride ourselves on the fact that we're able to go to communities and stimulate these communities for 6 or 9 months. I mean, we're kind of trapped. So we put a lot of money there. We don't travel with everything, so we're kind of consumeristic group here because you can't bring it all with you. So that's the main thing, though. Yeah, unionize the workforce so that we have safer and more uniform standards, and then just the legislation to not have so much red tape and take these things so long to get put in, because we don't have that time. I mean, right now time is of the essence, and I feel like we've got right now good backing for climate jobs, but they say these good union jobs, but everyone I know is looking for a union, and none of us are in one. So I think that's where the disconnect from the top and the bottom is. I mean, most of us are not unionized, and those who are don't do solar. I mean, I don't want to say that rude, but they maybe were a commercial electrician and never had done solar before. Whereas we don't want to do anything but solar.
And if you are at
wherever
a,
that be.
if you are at a local union, it's hard to continue doing solar because that local only has that job for a certain amount of time in that area. And then you're going to transfer to something else doing, a different job, maybe electrical, but in a different scope than what we do utility scale. And honestly, I don't want to do anything else. If I join a union, this is what I want to do. This is what I've done for 6 years, and I don't want to do anything else.
Feels good to do solar. It's like contributing to society a little bit. After we long gone, this thing's still going to be up and running and giving people power. It just feels good to.
We take pride in our work. Too,
Yeah.
Ask my grandkids. We've built every solar farm. They pass a solar panel. They're like, my papa built that. My daddy built that. I'm like, yeah, they did. Every one of them.
That's
And that's the great thing, is that they're getting into it now because that's all they hear is solar. I mean, so it has a chance to really work its way down the generations. And I mean, we're trying to leave this for them. I mean, we're not going to be here. So, build something that outlives you and maybe hopefully can give you a decent life while we're doing it.
Great. Well, thank you, Annie. And that last point about pointing to the solar fields that you helped build reminds me of a story that my colleague Jeff Grabowski, who's a longtime member of the Electrical Workers Union, mentions that's true with construction workers a lot too, right? To be able to point to pride to something that you've built and that's going to outlast you. So appreciate you bringing that story here.
That's one thing I did want to, is when we were talking about the differences between union and non-union, pride. Our union workers pride themselves on doing quality work, and they do. They do good work, and they do it safely, and they do it efficiently. When you get just this workforce of I'm going to call it like short service employees, there's not a pride in doing that work. It's something we're doing for today, and we're going to be hustling another job up, in a few months. So it's like, yeah, do it well, do it not. And then of course these guys drives them crazy because then they're doing reworks all the time because they're like,
that's the difference between we love this job and it's a job for them. That's the difference.
Literally, I was going to say, I had changed my name on Facebook for a little while because it was needed a break from everybody, but I just had some solar panels up. Well, my granddaughter, who's 4, calls me on Facebook after I reactivated my Facebook again. All I had was solar panels, and my name said Anne Boleyn, so she shouldn't have known. And she called me at 7 a.m. and I said, what are you doing calling me? She goes, well, I saw solar panels, so I knew it was you. And I was like, oh, well, thank you, but I'm at work. So, I mean, like, I eat, breathe, and sleep solar. I mean, it's probably my favorite thing to talk about.
Great.
But it intersects with so many things, yeah.
And we love that you've taken the time to talk with us about
Thanks
it
for
today.
having us. We're honored to be here.
So have a few minutes. Would love to get any audience questions. So I believe Jason has a mic. Let's take 3 or 4 questions and then, take a stab at answering any of them you see fit.
Hi, good morning. Thank you all for sharing your stories and your experience. It's really a great conversation. I guess one thing I was curious, so the title of this report is Exploring Workforce Conditions in New York's Solar Industry. But it sounds like you're from Georgia, you work in Texas, you work in Wyoming, you're kind of traveling all over. And I'm curious, is there any state that has better working conditions than New York in the solar industry? And what's different about it? Because again, New York has prevailing wage requirements for these big projects. That's now federal. And I'm curious if there's a place that's doing this better that we could learn from.
We'll take a few questions if you don't mind, and then come back and answer. But thank you. And anybody else? Do you have a question, or are you a mic runner? Okay, go for it. Both are acceptable answers. Yeah.
I have like a million questions, so I will be stealing you after. But I'm most curious about, all three of you talked a lot about the difference between union work and non-union work. And you also, Oscar in particular, you touched on the difference between the temp work where you maybe get paid higher wages versus the company work. So I'm just curious, like, I'm gonna give a double-barreled question, and that's cheating, and I'm sorry. But I'm curious, what, if any, other benefits the company offered that like maybe that you didn't like weigh as highly as just pay, or if there were any, and then what you guys see as the benefit of being a part of a union versus how you work now.
Maybe one more question if we have one. Yeah, over here.
I really appreciate you all being here. I just had a question about like a safety related one. I was a machine operator at a food packaging facility, and they were really bad about keeping a record of like injury, and especially people that got injured, they did not want to pay for help pay for like medical bills and stuff. What has been your experience with that? Are people just sort of left to their own devices when they get hurt? Or
Great. So have 3 questions. Just a reminder, difference in different states and what states have
I'll
better.
address that one when.
You want to address that one?
Yeah.
And then benefits outside of pay and benefits of being in a union was the second one. And a question about injury and reporting injuries on the job site. So all 3 of you start with whichever one.
I'll do the
Like-
injury and reporting, but you guys want to talk about the union and the other ones?
So on which state is better? Currently, I don't think there's anything that I've seen that's better than New York currently with the way things are tracking. Wisconsin is a close runner-up, though. I will let you know that. Wisconsin was very impressed when I was there. So it's definitely comparable to New York.
Actually, the whole Midwest,
Yeah.
like Illinois, Wisconsin, the Midwest, they also treat their employees pretty good.
He's worked in a few more Midwest states than me, but we both agree that we really like Wisconsin.
Yeah. And for the pay versus benefits, for most people, they'll be in it for the benefits. Oh yeah, this place has this. I have a child, and I'm always on the road. I miss a lot of stuff, but benefits would be nice if I didn't have to come out of pocket for everything all the time. But also, temps, we typically don't stay at certain companies too long anyway, so there would be no point for us to even sign up for those benefits just to have them go away once we go to another company. So until I do decide to choose a company, I think I'll be all right. Like it's not too bad. For most of us, that's actually just in it to make money, go home, probably buy a house. But that's typically the mindset of most of the solar people. They want the money, they forget about the benefits, we don't need it. But, if I was to be here from New York, I would definitely lean more towards the benefits.
Just to piggyback a little bit or add a little more to that, when we're talking about the areas, like I said, when they're in rural areas, we're targeting impoverished communities a lot of times for that workforce. And so they don't realize because, their previous experience was probably a low wage or a low benefit position. So things like healthcare, truck and gas cards, those come to leadership, 401k, things like that. A lot of these guys, that doesn't mean a hill of beans if we can't put food on the table tonight.
Exactly.
You know, nobody cares about having a truck. They care about, I don't care how many hours I need to work. I just need to get this money next week. You know, they typically get paid weekly and they need those benefits, you know, to be a $1,500 check or a $2,000 check. And if that means they're working 80 hours, then they're working 80 hours because their baby needs diapers or they need to pay a light bill or they need to get their mom medicine. Those are the realities of the things that these guys are dealing with on the day to day, not how big, you know, how many stock buybacks can I get or, you know, shares of this company. Like that's, those aren't even issues for most of the workforce because it's literally, how do I make my car note? How do I keep my phone on so that I can get the call to take this job? Can I take this job because I have legal issues to take care of? When we talked earlier, the study was showing about substance abuse. It's rampant. Mental health issues. You know, these guys could definitely use benefits, but that's not something that, you know, in your Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Right now, it's just they need wages and they need to be able to get food on their table and keep a roof over their head.
Also, I believe their mentality on that is the higher wages they can make, they can pay for those benefits out of their pocket because they don't know how long they're going to be at this job or when the next job, you know, is going to come around. Maybe they got to move a state or a company. So if they can pay out of their pocket for their benefits, they know that they can continue paying for those benefits without having to switch over, you know, companies and stuff like that and go through that whole process.
Exactly.
And
And then the final question was about the reporting. So that's another caveat that we're seeing with contractors will use a temp agency a lot of times so that they, when those injuries happen, the temp agency or the staffing company will take that hit on their name versus the actual contractors.
Yeah,
So
you reflect on the
what-
tip agency's injury rating and their insurance, so they can put it up on them, so the company doesn't have to reflect that themselves, and they can kind of, you know, shove it off on the tip agency, and then they don't even have to use that tip agency next year because maybe their incident rate is too high now.
And the
They can go with somebody different.
problem with the staffing companies is that when those things happen, what they do is they conveniently change their name.
That's correct.
So there have been some, at least, I want to say 3 off the top of my
I
head.
can think of at least 3 to 4 companies
That
that have
have
changed
changed
their
their name
3
almost
to 4
annually.
times.
Because I know who runs the company, so it's not very hard to figure out. It's the same guy. The next company, we just changed the name, changed up the decals. And they do this to help with those ratings and those insurance premiums and what have you, because the contractors are doing usually somewhere between, you know, on a larger scale, contractor might be doing 9 or 13 sites nationwide. So they just say, hey, staffing agency A, we need people in Castledale, Utah. You know, tomorrow we need 100 people. And they're like, on it, we got it. And then they start just calling folks and they're like, I know you're in Mississippi, you're in Florida, or you're in California. We need you in Miami. I'm like, you guys, that's across the country. Nobody has teleporters. Like, this is not gonna work. But that's with the operators. That's why we get so frustrated, or I get so frustrated with them saying Sunbelt or United, as though that's quality seat time and that you want to be standing or spotting for a guy who just went down to the local rental place and, you know, sort of showed proficiency in this machine and they gave him a card. Because at the end of the day, you know, you're trying to go home safe. And, but that's why they use staffing agencies a lot of times, is so that all the casualties and all the negative BS and PR goes to that staffing agency's name. And then we'll just change off of this one and go, there's about 3 or 4 that are what I would consider the majors. And then a lot of times these workers, especially when you're a temp, you're registered at every one. So you're just waiting for a recruiter to call you. And so like, there's no loyalty. I mean, if this guy's got a job for me today, I'm going over there, but then this guy calls and offers me $1 more. Well, forget it. It doesn't matter. I wasn't at home anyway. So I'll leave Montana and I'll go to Utah. It's not that far. I mean, globally speaking, when you're traveling this much. I mean, we put literally 100,000 miles on our car last year, so we do some driving. But you know, you're like, it's not that big of a deal. I'll just go over here for $1. That's why I have to talk to a lot of folks. Like I told him, I said, look, this company is a really good company that you're working for right now. Like I know you're with a temp agency right now, but stay. It's like they're gonna do you right. And Levi, you know, is a direct hire there, so he's doing a lot of fighting, you know, from that way to try to get things better. Which you know we're happy with them right now. Don't get me wrong, but that's how they do with the reporting. And so upside, there are a few companies here in the U.S. that are manufacturing their own panels and now starting to install farms. And the company that they're with actually has partnered now to recycle all of their damaged or no longer working panels. So they're literally a full 360 there to recycle or to produce, install, and recycle. And that's the kind of stuff that makes my heart excited to, you know, these companies are caring too, because I mean, we all got to live here. So.
Yeah, thank you, Annie.
Yeah.
And I would love to keep this conversation going. We do have to wrap up shortly. Just Oscar wanted to give you a chance if you had anything to add on those questions. I think you had mentioned that you wanted to speak on the injury question.
Oh, no. She covered it all.
All right,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the more recordables, but she answered everything.
Sure. And final thought.
No,
I
it's
believe
fine.
there was a question about the benefits for union, you know, what that would look like and what the better benefits would be there. The biggest one that I could say is, you know, someone to fight so that we can have these contracts made up and fight these employers for better wages and, you know, benefits and stuff like that. But the biggest one is going to be a pension. We're all out here trying to retire and we don't have any money saved, y'all. I mean, I'm being real. I make 6 figures and I feel broke.
Yeah.
And it's physically demanding. I mean, there is no way he's going to be jumping in and out of ditches at 70. I mean, I think 2 operators that I know they're 60s and they're like, Annie, I'm not laboring. If I have to get out of this machine, I'm not doing it. And I'm like, listen, they say they just need a skiddy operator. You good? He's like, I'm telling you, if they kick me out of my machine, I'm going home. I'm like, I got you, buddy. You know, so, I mean, these people can't physically labor until they're 70. I mean, they need a pension, you know, they need benefits. And if anything else, you know, I think people just forget it's physical labor and at double time what anyone was designed to work for. I mean, 40 hours is already a lot, but 80 hours and not getting those breaks. I mean, they can't do this forever and they can't take the time off to go even get a surgery if they needed one, you know, because it's.
I'll go to a birthday.
Yeah, or birthday.
Or a holiday.
Yeah, I don't know last
Or
time
vacation.
we yeah, well, this is our vacation right now. We all feel like we're being
Well,
bad playing.
I can say
today.
I definitely feel honored you spent your vacation with us.
Yeah, we loved it. It was great.
Great, thank you. So, want to extend my thanks again to our 3 panelists, Levi, Annie, and Oscar, for taking the time to talk about your experiences. There's a lot that's going through my mind, and I'm sure our teammates' minds, about how to incorporate this as we continue studying these issues, right? As we continue diving into the working conditions, thinking through the union effect, how that affect, even for non-union workers, pay, enforcement of the law, working conditions, benefits, because I know a lot of our friends in the building trades, they hop from employer to employer or job site to job site, but they've negotiated portable benefits that way that you don't have to worry about giving up the pension or other things. This has been a fantastic conversation. I am going to close it here and turn it back over to our Executive Director, Lara Skinner, who will close out our event. We can head back to our seats.
Thanks, Zach. And let's give another round of applause to our panelists. Annie, Levi, Oscar, that was really great. We really appreciate you being here. You know, you taking the time to be here, sharing your experiences, you know, and really being part of our efforts to try to understand better what's happening in the industry. We really appreciate it. And I think you so eloquently and clearly,
stated what we're committed to, which is how do we make sure that we're building this new clean energy economy and that it's based on high quality jobs that people can sustain their families and communities on. So thank you. Really appreciate it. I want to thank everyone in New York City and online for joining us for this really great discussion. As I said at the beginning of the event, this is, our first foray into trying to study the working conditions in the clean energy industry, including in solar. We're really committed to this work. We're committed to strengthening, expanding this work. We believe it's imperative to guiding New York State's and other states' policies to build out an equitable clean energy economy with high quality jobs. And as Avalon mentioned at the beginning, we are really happy to do one-on-one meetings and private briefings for organizations on the study and on the results of it. We would welcome that. Getting your insights and feedback on what we're learning from this data would be incredibly helpful. So please reach out to us. Before we end, I just want to mention a few other clean energy jobs projects that we're working on. We're doing a big Inflation Reduction Act project right now. We're trying to track job creation from the Inflation Reduction Act in solar and wind and manufacturing. We want to, understand what is the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act. As part of that, we're analyzing prevailing wage data in California on solar and wind projects. Prevailing wage data in California is public. It's the only state where it's all public. So we can actually get in there and take a look at that, look at how many people are employed on a project, how they're being classified, what type of worker, what they're being paid. So we're excited to do that work. We're also beginning an ethnographic study of the challenges and opportunities to organizing in the solar industry. And then on another clean energy topic, offshore wind, we're doing a deep dive on how we can expand offshore wind supply chain manufacturing opportunities in New York State, including what's the port infrastructure that's needed to really support that industry. So we really look forward to working with you all on these projects, getting your feedback, insight, and input as we're developing them and working on them, sharing the results, and then of course organizing future events like today. So thanks again for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it, and have a great weekend.